Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's once again me, Zach, here today with another tier list for you guys. And by another tier list, I mean a remix of an old tier list. I was thinking about going back through all of my Barony tier lists and fully updating them, starting over and discussing all the classes and stuff again. However, there haven't been huge updates to pretty much any of the classes in the recent year or so since I posted the original one. So for that reason, we are not going to be doing all of the tier list over again. I'm just going to be making some small corrections to a couple of those tier lists. Starting today with the class tier list. With more playtime and more diverse playtime comes a better understanding of the different classes and things, as well as a better understanding of how to place each class based off of a combination of solo and multiplayer experiences. If you've watched the channel, you guys know I have a fair bit of experience playing solo, but the majority of my time is spent playing multiplayer. So for that reason, I have skewed towards multiplayer in these tier lists a bit. But that being said, there are still some exceptions to that. We're going to be starting at the bottom, and we're going to be starting with a class that I think is often, maybe not overlooked, but is often kind of seen as a weirdo, a bit of an outlier, and that is the Punisher class. The Punisher class in the past, I really thought had a powerful late game, but a pretty mediocre early game. With more playtime, observing my friend try to play it, as well as playing it myself, of course, beating the game with Punisher, I have come to the unfortunate conclusion that Punisher as a class is sort of bad. It suffers in a couple different ways. First off, its stat array in terms of what levels up per level up is decent. It's very aggressive. It levels up predominantly strength, as well as perception, which is decent. That is a decent top two to have. However, both of those are tied with the charisma stat, and charisma, of course, is pretty bad, generally speaking. Alongside that, their int scaling is lower, as well as their dex scaling are both lower than those three stats I just listed, and constitution is their worst scaling stat. Sorry. What this means is that the Punisher is always going to be kind of squishy, which can be overcome. That's not a huge problem to have. It's not great, but it can be worked around. But what it also means is that they're not even super good at ranged combat or magic. Now, where this starts to become a problem is when you combine it with their starting stats. Their starting stats are, in order, strength -1, dex 1, con -1, int -1, and perception and charisma at 0. Meaning that this sort of mediocre scaling, where they're going to be getting a lot of charisma alongside perception and strength, but unfortunately a lot of charisma as well, that is compounded by having a pretty poor overall stat array at level 1. 30 HP and 30 mana on the first floor is fine. It's balanced, but when you look at their skills is where things start to fall even further down the toilet. Magic is at 20, meaning you can learn some spells early on. That is decent. It's nice to have a start in magic. And casting is at a whopping 40, which does allow you to cast plenty of spells, and gives you, a little bit of oomph on that front. Ranged and axes are both at 25. This means that a class that wants to be relatively stealthy doesn't have stealth bonuses early on. This kind of forces you down the path of relying heavily on the whips if you want to be getting the drop on enemies, because you won't be able to sneak up very close to them with your axe. In solo play, the Punisher is okay, for sure. And with very careful usage in multiplayer, it's not like it's atrocious. Keep in mind that this tier list is not really an A, B, C... How did I mess that up? S, A, B, C, D. It's low risk, high reward, down to high risk, mid reward. The Punisher can still win the game. Absolutely. The Punisher can still, throw down with the big boys, and at really high levels can put out decent damage. But when you compare their stat arrays starting and scaling to other things, even like the Arcanist or, of course, the Ninja, you look at like the Sexton, who scales all 3 of the DPS stats, compensates pretty heavily for being, relatively squishy, I would say. Whereas the Punisher just kind of doesn't. Where the Punisher does shine, however, is in terms of the sheer amount of unique stuff that they get access to. And while there are a few other classes that get, pound for pound more unique stuff, I mean, the Mechanist whole thing is just getting a bunch of unique shit that nobody else starts with, really. To be fair, if anybody else got a Tinkering Kit, they could do everything the Mechanist starts with pretty quickly. It wouldn't take very long. The Punisher's unique stuff is actually unique. 3 of their unique things out of 4 are unobtainable by anybody else. They are the only ones who start with a whip. They are the only ones who start with the Executioner's Hood, and they are the only ones who start with the Inner Demon spell. All 3 of these cannot be obtained elsewhere. They also do start with the Teleport Other spell, and they do start with a Ring of Conflict. I guess that counts as unique as well. I forget about that a lot. But all of that stuff gives them a lot of tricks and little things they can do, little neat things, like little whatevers that they could technically pull out as an option, but most of them are just mediocre. The Ring of Conflict is not awful. If you're playing solo, what you can do is you find a group of enemies, you activate the Ring of Conflict, and while they're fighting each other, you get back shots on them. Don't take that out of context. You can, level up your stealth as well as your weapon skills. The downside of it is it doesn't necessarily give you a ton of XP. Because enemies that you don't know about will kill each other before you get there, and even if you might get XP for them killing each other, you won't get the XP you would get for, say, your axe skill by hitting an enemy directly. So you're always losing out a little bit with that. Now, of note, one of the most important things for any class is being able to clear the Gnomish Mines consistently. And while I wouldn't say the Punisher is great at it, having the Ring of Conflict can be pretty good. Most enemies in the Gnomish Mines are allies with each other, but with the Punisher, you can activate the Ring of Conflict and get them to fight before you even see them. Again, you're always losing out on some XP. It's not as good as a lot of the classes up here who can clear the Gnomish Mines very easily on their own, but it's not the worst thing ever, for sure. The Executioner's Hood gives you mana regen when you bleed enemies. The whip has a high chance to bleed, as do axes, and the whip has a chance to disarm opponents, as well as having +1 block range, meaning it hits basically 2 dungeon squares away from you, which allows for very easy kiting. Again, I don't want it to seem like I don't like the Punisher. I actually do like the Punisher. They're one of the classes I often find myself kind of gravitating towards as an option to play. But I feel as though right now they're in a kind of weird spot where they are almost like a stealthy trickster mage, which competes with both the Arcanist to an extent, which is kind of the ranged DPS mage, as well as the Sexton, who is the other stealthy trickster mage. But the Sexton, I feel, just generally does it better. I think that fixing, in quotes, the Punisher, making them a little bit less meh, wouldn't be too hard. I think that if I were doing it, I would remove their charisma scaling. Because I just don't really see the Punisher class as being a class that is focused around charisma. It just seems kind of odd. If there was like a fear mechanic in the game, maybe, and it was charisma based, maybe Punisher would make sense for that. But as it is, I personally find that the Punisher is more of a ranged mixed with melee mage DPS, which is very weird and not super well represented elsewhere. The closest is, again, the Sexton. So for me, I think what the Punisher should get stat-wise is probably an int scaling that is equivalent to perception and strength. I don't know if that's a perfect solution, but I do think that it is something that would make the Punisher a bit more playable. Anything else that I think of would be I don't know, a bigger change, and we're not really going to discuss that here. Next up, we go up a little ways. We've got the Mesmer. I do think I'm going to move the Mesmer back down to the bottom of C tier. I don't think that the Hood compensates enough for the many weaknesses that the Mesmer has as a class. They also scale Charisma. It's better than with the Punisher, but they have like negative scaling for anything that isn't one of the mental stats. So when it comes to int, perception, and charisma, they scale just fine. They get great stats in those departments, in fact. But when it comes to anything outside of that, con, strength, dex, no scaling whatsoever. This is stuff I covered in my other video, but overall, I do think that my favorite class, the Mesmer, well, not my favorite, but top 3 favorite classes of mine is, in fact, bottom 3 classes in the game. Go figure. It's just, if you don't get lucky on the first couple floors and find something that's worth charming with your staff, you feel bad. You feel like you don't really have much of a class. The dubious honor of having the highest charisma growth of any class in the game is dubious. It is not a good thing to have, really. And having one of the lowest con scaling rates in the game, also pretty bad. You really want to be hiding behind your teammates. Or, to be clear, tamed allies. Getting access to the charm spell, I think, is the big problem, because it feels like a lot of the power of the Mesmer class is sort of locked behind a combination of their Hood and that spell. But that spell is just not very good. But it's... I don't know. I don't know how to buff that spell. I feel like the answer to making the Mesmer good, or better, because it is good. It is high reward. Like, it's important to note, I do consider the Mesmer really good late game. Even though they scale Charisma, I guess I'm going to clarify this, and then we'll talk about the Charm spell some more. Their Int and Perception scaling are both really high. Their Int scaling is higher than any of the Punisher's stat scalings are. And their Perception is almost as high, which just puts them in a different ballpark entirely. In addition, having that high charisma stat is good for them early on because they are a class that is built entirely around leadership. And if played with certain races, you can even take advantage of the trading bonuses a little bit. That being said, in the late game, when the charisma stat has completely fallen off and no longer matters, and you're comparing the Punisher versus the Mesmer, the Punisher has a lot of unique items that he can kind of, or they can kind of use to, like, get a bit of an edge over others. They can get mana regen from their Hood. They've got the Whip, which is a really cool, unique item. They've got a special spell that allows them to distract enemies. But the Mesmer will often just hit harder with their spells, and with infinitely spammable Force Bolt and the Cold spell, which is the spell that the Mesmer starts with, that's all they really need to put out crazy high DPS. They don't even have atrocious strength scaling. It is lower than the Punisher's, of course, but it's only 44%. That's not atrocious. You can actually get your strength to be decent on a Mesmer, and even put out, I would say, mediocre, but respectable melee damage. So, in that late game scenario, I do think that the Mesmer pulls ahead a little bit, purely in terms of the overall stat growth and having like really powerful allies just in massive armies more easily and earlier than the Punisher can. That being said, getting back to the Charm spell and what I think is weak about it, it competes with Domination, and just as a note of interest here, we can check the stats. Yep, the magic and casting of the Mesmer class starts at 60 and 40 respectively. If you get magic up to 100, you get the Dominate spell for free. So as you can already imagine, it will not take you very long, especially if you're playing something like a vampire, or an automaton, something that has like a specific magic bonus. An automaton with the Hood and post Gnomish Mines will have insane mana regeneration by simply eating rocks. A vampire is able to spam levitate to level up their magic possibly to 100 before you even get to the Gnomish Mines, depending on how things go on the first 2 floors. That means that, also to be clear here, the other classes or the other races will not be too far behind. Meaning the Mesmer is going to have Dominate almost before they learn Charm. Like, you'll learn Charm, like, right before you get Dominate. So because Charm is so difficult to learn, because it is restricted to a single charmed target per person, seemingly, and because Dominate is just infinitely spammable and available for free just for playing the video game, it's very difficult to see a use for Charm. If Dominate had a cap, I think Charm would be a good spell. It wouldn't be great, but I do think that if Dominate had a cap, it would be worth moving Mesmer up to A tier, where the risk is not nearly as high, because Charm would be a bit more valuable. Dominate would be less valuable is kind of the thing. And even then, it might not move all the way up. It might stay in C tier. The early game for Mesmer is rough. As it is right now, with Dominate in its current state, Charm doesn't really have a niche use. I've cast Charm like all of twice in my entire time playing this game, because I just don't see the point. I use the Charm Staff early on to get like a troll or something, or a really tough human ally sometimes, and then after that I use my natural leadership until I get Dominate, because it's only going to be a couple floors, and then once I have Dominate, I use Dominate for the rest of the game. Charm just doesn't really come up. Maybe if the secondary effect of Charm was stronger, that would be a good thing to do instead of nerfing Dominate. When you already have a charmed ally, and you hit someone else with Charm, it causes them to be slowed and back away from you. If that were buffed a little bit, that might be kind of cool. I don't know. Maybe if it could work a little bit like Frenzy in Skyrim, where you shoot a target with Charm and it briefly causes them to be under the effects of the Ring of Conflict, or even give them like a temporary ally status where they attack their allies, but the XP goes to you because they're under your control. Like, that kind of thing might be sort of cool. I don't know. As it is, they're just meh across the board, really. Next up, in the B tier, I wanted to change around a few things. I do want to move Conjurer up, mostly just because Conjurer is not that risky once you know what you're doing, or if you're playing in multiplayer. It's really just the first floor that's a bit dicey, and after that, it's pretty easy to just send in your minions to do all your work. There's not much else to say about Conjurer. I don't think they deserve to move up to high reward in any way, and yeah, I don't think they're all that risky. So moving them there, and let's see, what was the other one? Ah, yes, Healer. Healer I've been on the fence about. I'm pretty sure I was in my previous video as well. I'm going to move them down into the B tier. In multiplayer, I would still say it's very nice to have a healer, and you could see them as being kind of an A tier. My issue is that heal spells suck in their current iteration. They're just not very mana efficient. You're trading oftentimes a ton of mana. Sometimes an equivalent amount of mana to health is traded. And that's, I don't know. It's just not very good. I prefer Troll's Blood when it comes to healing spells, and the extra healing spell is pretty decent. But when it comes to the base healing spell, it's not very good. And the healer class stat array is solid, but a lot of the reason I put them so high is because they become tanky in the late game. The more you play, the less constitution really matters that much. It is nice to have, but, like, I don't know, I just don't think that healer is on the same tier as wizard and sexton, and certainly not on the same level as, like, imp form shaman in terms of potential, like, magic DPS or anything. So they stay down here. Again, in pure multiplayer tier list, I would put them a bit higher, but as is, they stay there. That, I think, is it. I don't really... Yeah, I don't really see anything else that I want to change too much. I think all of the other classes are roughly where they should be. And I hope that everyone takes into account that none of these changes are really that massive. I think that all of these classes are very good. Of course, the usual tier list caveats. Anything can win. Everything has won. People speedrun this game with every class. I mean, it just doesn't really matter that much. But these are the classes as I think they stand at the moment. I think Accursed is in a fine spot overall. I think it is what it's meant to be. But I would like to see Punisher get a little bit of love, personally. And I'd like to see Mesmer have their class identity enhanced in some way. I've given a couple ideas here. I honestly think I might just make a video on the Mesmer class in general, though, and talk about why I like it and what I wish we could see from it, because I don't want to come off as overly negative about any of these classes that are in the, like, C and D tier, because they're all very good. It's just that I just don't necessarily think that these two are filling the niche that they are kind of meant to. I don't really feel like they're living up to their archetypes. Either way, thank you guys for watching. There's going to be a couple more of these. I don't know how many I'm going to do of these update tier lists, but I hope you guys enjoy them. I hope you get something out of them. And until next time, peace.